The first big game of 2024 is played online on chess.com in Title Tuesday, or as former world champion Vladimir Kramnik likes to call it, Cheating Tuesdays. We know that Vladimir has been silenced. He has been frequently posting blogs in which he has his own theories about cheating, with various top players being involved. I don't want to go too deeply into that. I've not been following Vladimir's theories, frankly speaking, and I think in general Vladimir should better focus on chess. And well, the interesting thing is that even though he has been banned from posting blogs, he decided to play in the first Title Tuesday of the year. And he's playing with the white pieces against another former world champion, Magnus Carlsen, the reigning world number one. And well, interestingly, a lot of cool things are happening in this game. So please, let's have a look with me. And of course, subscribe to the channel. Thanks for doing that. Vladimir goes for one e4, and look what Magnus is doing. He is going for another troll with the move h6. He's just making fun. Or better said, he just wants to get a game, avoid any opening theory, and just rely on his general abilities to outplay people, including Vladimir Kramnik. And well, we know that Magnus is the best blitz player. He just won the World Blitz Championships in Uzbekistan, but also online he set the record. And interestingly that, okay, Vladimir Kramnik is a huge player, but on chess.com he is more than 350 points lower rated than Magnus Carlsen. So you get an idea how Magnus is approaching this game. Let's see what happens. d4, e6, knight c3, a6. Another pawn move by black. Don't try this at home. I think Magnus's opening play is not really a great example for people who are starting this game, but his position is not too bad yet. Knight f3, and here he goes for the move b5, which kind of reminds us of modern setups in which instead of playing the moves e6 and h6, black usually goes for g6 and bishop g7. Now, the thing is that after bishop d3, white is just continuing developing its minor pieces. Black goes for the move c5, challenging the pawn on d4. And the big question is, how is white going to cope with that move? Well, there are various ways of playing here. I would say the principled move is to grab space in the center with the move d5, which makes it harder for the black minor pieces to be brought into play. But Kramnik decides to take on c5. I don't like the move too much. After bishop takes c5, the position more or less looks like a Sicilian Khan variation, in which of course the black c-pawn has been traded for the pawn on d4. You can say the pawn on h6 looks a little bit strange, but how is white ever going to take advantage of it? Well, let's see. Castling kingside, bishop b7, and here various options. You can get your bishop into the game, or you can even try to push your pawn, rook e1, queen e2. Basically, every move makes a lot of sense here. Vladimir goes for the move a4, which is a typical move in a lot of Sicilians, but frankly, I am not a fan of it, because black pushes the pawn to b4, hits the knight on c3, the knight gotta go away, and now black develops the knight to f6, attacking the pawn on e4. And how are you going to defend the pawn? Well, if you push the pawn to e5, attacking the knight on f6, there's knight g4, with ideas of taking on f3. The bishops are looking great, but there are also plans for black just to hit a pawn on e5, and I think white has a lot of problems holding on to that pawn. So instead, Kramnik goes for the move knight g3, protecting the pawn, but frankly the knight doesn't look very great on g3, and we do have a kind of typical Sicilian battle. Black goes for d6, queen e2, knight bd7, nice developing move by black, obviously, and it's interesting to know that black consciously refrains from castling. Why that is, you will see in a second. First, white plays here the move a5, fixing the pawn on a6, making it harder, especially for the rook to come to c8, because the pawn is in the fire line of the queen and bishop. Queen c7 is played, and bishop d2 by Kramnik. Finally, he completes his development. Rooks are connected, and probably he has ideas here to open up the queen side with a move like c3, maybe opening up the c file to put pressure here. And you would expect black just to go ahead now with castling kingside, but as I said, Magnus has his own ideas. Plays here another pawn move, h6, h5, with the plan of coming to h4 to kick the knight from g3 when the knight would be forced to go back to h1. That's an all full square. That's something you don't really want to see happening, and therefore bishop g5 is played. White is trying to make use of black's last move by installing a piece on that square. Black is no longer covering the g5 square, and the bishop of course also covers the h4 square. So it's really difficult now for black to push the pawn. Black goes knight e5. Very interesting move, offering the exchange of a set of minor pieces, and white accepts it. White takes on e5, d takes e5, and we have a typical Sicilian structure with double pawns on the e-file. But these pawns, they're quite good, and well, in fact, the knight on on g3 doesn't look great. Now the knight on f3 is gone. h4 becomes a serious threat. What should white do? A move like h4 is pretty good, but I think that's not an easy move to play. It does weaken the g4 square, so maybe the knight could come to that square at some point. Anyway, it's a blitz game. Don't forget that. A lot of inaccurate moves by even the best players in the world. Vladimir Kramnik decides to take on f6, giving up his dark squared bishop, but he has an idea. After black recaptured, there's a nice pawn block in the center. White is winning a pawn, captures with a knight on h5. The knight is defended by the queen, so black of course cannot take with the rook. And white is even intending to take the pawn on f6. So what is Magnus's idea? King e7. The king is fantastically placed in the center, protecting the pawn on f6, connecting the rooks. And where's black's compensation? Well, very simple. On the open g and h file. Well, actually the files are half open, but it feels like the attack is just coming very soon. White is really playing with fire here. And Kramnik decides to go back with a knight to g3, but now a very nice power move by Magnus. Rook h4. He's about to double rooks on the h-file, or at least he puts pressure against the pawn on e4. And how he's going to make use of it, we will see in a second. White goes for the move h3, anticipating the pressure coming against that pawn on h2. So white puts the pawn there. And Magnus plays a very logical move. But before I'm going to show you which move he played, I would like to point out which move is actually the best. Because black is a pawn down, but he has tremendous play with these bishops. Especially dark squared bishop is great. It's even pinning the pawn. Bishop on b7 would like to join the action as well. But now the best move here is to play the move f5. That's a really big move. It looks as if white had been preventing black from playing that move f5, but you cannot really take here. Because there is queen c6 with a huge mating threat against the pawn on g2. You cannot block with your pawn by placing it on f3 because of the bishop on c5. And interfering on e4 is also not great because of that rook on h4. Black is just winning here. So after f5, white cannot take. But okay, that would have been a different game. Rook g8 is played, and in a blitz game, I think many people would have played this move. It's so logical now. White has played the move h3. The knight on g3 is vulnerable. It's not protected by the pawn. So the king goes to h2. But now f5 is played anyway. And it's very difficult. I mean, I don't know the exact time situation on the clock, but you can imagine that facing such an huge pressure, you succumb to it, and you just make mistakes one after another. It's very natural in my opinion. So what should white do? Probably capture the pawn, but opening up the diagonal for the bishop is not something I would seriously have considered. Probably there's even a move like e4 when you're opening up the diagonal for the queen as well. You cannot take on e4 because of just capturing, and the rook protects the bishop. The knight is pinned. So, well, a lot of things can happen in here. Doesn't make sense to analyze it too deeply. If white plays correctly, then after bishop takes a6, probably he's holding on here. But just one idea I want to show you is rook f4. This is just a fantastic move pointed out to the machine. And the idea is that if white is careless, let's say you take on b7, then you don't recapture, but you go for rook takes f2. Eliminating the defender. If you take it, it's queen takes g3 with check. That's why the rook is there on g8. If you go king g1, it's queen takes g2 with checkmate. If you go king h1 instead, well, then the bishop comes to d6, and mate on h2 cannot be stopped. If you try to go away, it's queen h2, king f1, queen h1, checkmate. Just very nice, simple line, and well, practically this is something black is just aiming for. Let's see what happened in the game. White didn't capture on f5. Decided to take the pawn on a6 right away, but then there's bishop takes e4. Black is capturing the central pawn, and the bishop is really strong with potential threats against the white king. Knight takes e4 on the board. Rook takes e4, attacking the queen. And the queen goes away. Not really clear where the queen is heading to, but okay, it's at least not under an attack. Magnus, he made an inaccurate move. He decided to put a rook on d4. And looks like you're making a space for your e-pawn to come forward to include the queen into the attack. Apparently rook f4 is even stronger to put pressure against the pawn on f2. Interesting idea, of course, but let's see what happens after rook d4. Logical move also, but Kramnik, he just made a huge blunder here. He should have anticipated potential threats, and he felt that e4 is coming, so that's why he moved the king away out of this diagonal. But can you see the big move here for black? Pause the video for a second, like this video, just subscribe, watch all my other videos in the meantime. Just have another nice glass of champagne celebrating the new year. Anyway, hopefully you have now found the key move here for black, as the weakness is the pawn on g2, as well as the unprotected bishop on a6. Queen c6 is just a very simple double attack, which also happens in games of former world champions. The game just ends abruptly here, and well, you cannot do much. You gotta defend the mating threat. Queen f3 is played, but then you take the bishop and your piece down. I mean, Kramnik played a few more moves, went for the move c3. You just take, queen recaptures, you're attacking the bishop, but now main task for black is just make sure that you don't blunder anything. Make sure everything is protected. Rook protects bishop, bishop attacks the queen, pawn protects rook. Queen c7, king f6, everything is protected. Queen b6 played. Well, then queens are coming off the board, and after rook b8, you're wrapping up the pawn. Rook b8, rook a6, rook d6. Here Kramnik resigned, and well, you can imagine how he felt after this game. I think he must have felt disgusted to have joined Cheating Tuesdays again. Kramnik has said that he will never play again these tournaments, but who knows what is going to happen in the rest of this year. I'm curious to see, I'm looking forward to see Kramnik playing many more games on the server, as well as Magnus, of course. Let's see what 2024 will bring for us. See you soon. Bye bye.